actually, which is improving the way the world is led, and this consists of 3 sessions. The first one is by Stephen Langton, who is partner at Russell Reynolds Associates, which is a global leadership advisory and search firm helping their clients build teams of transformational leaders who can meet today's challenges and anticipate the digital, economic, and political trends that are reshaping the global business environment. RRA exists to improve the way the world is led. Stephen has been a frequent contributor to the World Economic Forum, where he has also taught at their Global Fellows Leadership Program and served as adjunct faculty in leadership at a number of leading business schools. He also co-authored the book Redefining Leadership, which explores Western leadership experience in Asian markets. So the title is Sustainable Leadership, and Stephen, you're here with us now, so over to you. Welcome.
Welcome, nice to meet you.
Thank you very much, and it's a great privilege to be able to speak to a group like this about a topic which no one can say they are an expert on now in this environment. And so thank you for a generous introduction. And whilst I've dedicated the last 25 years to understanding leadership around the world in our firm, I'm quite confident now that anyone says they're a leadership expert is a bit of a fraud. Things have changed. There aren't any experts, but we are now seeing patterns. And in our work, certainly with our firm, very privileged to advise hundreds of chairmen and CEOs of global companies, we are seeing patterns about what's working, so much so that it's easy to advise leaders that are struggling. And I want to share some of those this evening, just as glimpses of starting a conversation about coming back to some simplicity rather than making it more complex. So if I may try and share some slides to illustrate some of these points. Hoping you can see this. I can see on the screen you can. Things have changed, and we talk about a sustainable new world order, not just a radical reaction. And we're noticing in clients that are succeeding at their leaders, there's a difference in purpose. There's a change in the anthropology of what the world's doing right now. And I'll talk about that because that's quite inspiring. There's certainly a change in the concept and the psychology of planning. And it's a renaissance in renewing our vows with the ideas of sustainability, whilst the world's slightly less demanding of profitability and pure commercial outcomes. One of the things we found as soon as the crisis happened with the COVID virus, CEOs tended to go to 2 points. They either went missing in action or they became alive and they led. And one of the things that was very clear about this was the fact that we had leaders that understood it wasn't their responsibility to set the direction. All they had to do was demonstrate attention to their purpose. And much like a compass heading, if you've got 40 people around the world all lost, if they have a compass, they're all pointing in the same direction. It's a great start point. And so for the really quick leaders that address the COVID crisis and address the issues of new commercial order, they said, what is the purpose of our company? And that will determine what we're going to do, how fast we're going to make decisions, whether we have to lose people and whether we have to invest in new areas. What's our purpose? Who are our stakeholders? What are our values in the way we're going to do things? And therefore, what are our priorities? And all of a sudden, the pressure came off leaders to have to be the jury, to have to be the decision maker. And they outsourced it to a much higher order, which is, why does our company exist? And all they had to do was be custodians of that. So this crisis has returned us to, what are we existing for? And this isn't a purpose just written on your website. This is something embedded in the way leaders talk. So if we can come back to a common voice, what's next? Well, we found that purpose changed a fundamental, which is, who do we serve? And for ages, we served shareholders. Corporations said we live and die by serving shareholders. And we've found that the companies that are succeeding are literally inverting the priority list of their stakeholders. What does that mean? Well, let's go back to something fascinating that happened on August the 19th, just last year, when in the US, the Business Roundtable, as a voice for standards of corporations, suddenly changed and said it's not about shareholder. After 40 years of saying it's all about the shareholder, we saw them articulating that it is time to change. And the Business Roundtable said corporations are here to serve customers, then employees, then suppliers, then communities, and of course shareholders. We respect that you provide the capital for which to do this. Now this ended in a row, and the institutional investors said this is almost illegal. And it took a long time for companies to really choose to adopt this until COVID hit. And we've just surveyed, our firm's just surveyed over 200 directors of 200 corporations and asked boards, what are the new priorities? And this is what they told us: that the boards that are succeeding are prioritizing employees, then customers, then shareholders, yes. But this top tier has been an inversion. We're here for customers and employees, and shareholders. I know you've been patient, but you're going to need to be patient a little bit longer, because the business success is the employees and the customers. And we haven't done this for decades. So we've got companies renewing their vows with what's really important here: connecting the organization to the needs of customers, not to the next needs of shareholders. It takes courage, but the leaders doing this are succeeding. So we're changing purpose. We also need to talk about the fact that the anthropology of leadership is changing. After 45 years of writing about the psychology of leadership, let's look at ourselves as a race, because this is one of the most profound lessons we've learned with offices across the world, that for the first time ever, the differences in leadership that were explainable by race, by ethnic background, by tradition, by heritage, are dissolving. It wasn't that long ago to say, you need to understand the way we do leadership in Japan is very different, and there are rules that you need to find out. The way we lead in China, the way we lead in Poland, the way we lead in London, it's different because of cultural. Well, what we're finding is in crisis, that gets stripped back. Culture, history, ethnic traditions, rituals, rules are being stripped away because people need leading, and there isn't time for all the rituals. So I'm putting up a picture of two people, and I really hope you can recognize them. This isn't quite inspiring, but these two people, male and female, if you don't recognize them, this is a composite face of the average human male and female today on the planet. If we're all blurred into one, this is what we look like. And it's useful to think about, is there a common average human being? Because we're now learning from our clients, we can pretty much predict how these people need to be led without knowing what culture they're from and without knowing their backgrounds or needs. They're humans. And so we're stripping back to understanding humans need leading in very clear, simple ways. And when we harness that, and maybe we'll have time to talk about this later, and replace what we were doing, we find success. We want clear direction. We want a sense of confidence we can do our role. We want a sense of identity with what we're doing. And we want a sense of support, the collaborative aspect of being a tribe. And when you go back to the basics and you attach it to purpose and values, we have an absolute algorithm for success. And we have CEOs adopting this. Another thing that's changed is the concept of how we're planning. And we're seeing that investors are saying, how dare you, CEO? How dare you tell us that you're giving us a 5-year strategic plan? No one's that clever and certain. We'll admire you for giving us a 5-year, perhaps a 5-year ambition for your company, but do not tell us it's a plan. Give us a 1-year plan, maybe even give us a 6-month plan, show us your ambition, but we want you to make sense of your environment. Most of the investor groups we're working with, they're telling the CEOs they're investing in, they're saying, we don't expect you to deliver returns. We don't even expect you to deliver dividends and profits. But we do expect you to do better than your competitors. And if they're all down 50%, We'll stay with you if you're down 40%. Now, this is very different thinking. So we've moved into this language that strategic planning is no longer what we're looking for, but the most elite CEOs are there with their teams making sense of their environment. Now, where have we seen this before? Well, we haven't seen this in business for a long time. But the armies of the world and the police forces of the world and the medical services of the world live with this their entire time, knowing that they don't know what's around the next corner and knowing they can't cleverly predict it like we've tried to do in business. So we talk about this idea of escape room thinking. Those of you who haven't done one, this is the idea. It's an entertainment concept where you and a group of people, the lights go on and you are trapped in a puzzle and you've got to get out. And it's brilliant analysis for the way we're watching business leaders succeed. The first thing about an escape room is you know you're incompetent. You know you don't have the answers from your past. And you know the only skill you have is gathering information. And then what do we do with it? We experiment with it. We look for patterns. We test. We make mistakes until we find how it fits together into progress. And ultimately, we escape the puzzle. So information and the new competence which leaders are showing, which is correlating to success in our experience, is the ability to learn. When did we ever appoint a CEO saying that we expect them to learn? So are we showing learning, the ability to gather information, make sense of it on a shorter time horizon to get out of the escape room? Because the most important rule is once we're out and someone says go back into the next escape room, you can't presume any of that experience is going to be useful again. And so how do we unlearn and relearn and test and experiment in shorter time cycles? CEOs that are doing this with their teams are really making an impact, but it means letting go of the status and letting go of the identity of I'm good at strategic planning, because we're not. Strategic planning presumed the external environment was fixed and the variable was how clever your plan was. But now we're realizing the external environment was the thing least fixed. And so we adapt at shorter time horizons. And investors and stakeholders are tolerating that, and indeed, they're appreciating that. So we've got an aspect here of very different thinking, learning, information gathering. Things are changing, which means the concept of time is changing as well. Yes, we're not tolerating. We can have visions for the 10-year point. We can have ambitions for the 5-year point. But we're going much more into shorter time horizons of projecting what's achievable. And the reason behind this has been quite clear. There are more people that can believe in the next goal is achievable, the nearer it is and the more visible it is. It's quite clear as we look at the way investors are talking, we've had decades of following leaders out of faith. And that isn't working anymore. We now need and we expect to follow our leaders out of belief. And faith, of course, is belief without evidence. We will not follow out of faith. We need leaders to show they're working, to be able to explain, and to be able to make everyone below them believe it's achievable what the next step is. And that means shorter visions and shorter time horizons, but it's creating faster progress. So time changes. We've had decades of dealing with 3 horizons of growth. And in the old days, that was assuming we're going to have a different CEO for each horizon. Well, today, 1 CEO, 3 horizons, if not 4. And so again, the concept of time is compressing. And it's differentiating the way that we're handling it and our attitude to it. So we've got a number of things happening that we're seeing in patterns of those leaders that are making sense and getting traction. Because the only leaders that aren't succeeding are the ones that have said, I'm going to carry on as I always did. I trust myself. I know what I'm doing. We'll be fine. And that confidence is portraying success. So let's come on to a different agenda, because actually the leaders that are succeeding were also the ones that up to this point have had the most compelling and effective sustainability agenda. And this is interesting because sustainability puts us to different time horizons of choice. We've just been very proudly working for the last 2 years with the United Nations Global Compact. We're proud of a strategic partnership with the UNGC. And we've been working with one of the world's top leaders who have delivered commercial success as well as world best class sustainability success. And we studied over 4,000 cases of leaders doing this. And we narrowed it down to actually a very small few that were constantly being able to get A grades for sustainability and A grades for commercial success. And what did we learn? And this is valuable for leadership in the new era. First of all, it was very disappointing. The truth is, 92% of business leaders told us that we believe that the integration of sustainability into a business is critical. It's critical to our success. But when we went and looked at those case studies, only 48% actually had sustainability built into their operations, and only 21% said that they believed their business was currently playing a critical role, a necessity, and were actually doing their part. So why have we had this disappointing observation? Well, when you go into the way we're developing leaders, we found that when we looked at over 4,000 job descriptions that we had on our database in the recent era for senior leaders, 15% of those job descriptions for senior leaders referred to sustainability, and only 4% of them, of those role specifications, demanded that was experience and capability in candidates. So we have a big rhetoric gap here, but we went down to the narrow. We looked at those which were really doing the job well, and we found amazing patterns. First of all, and I put this as a reflection for you listening, what is it that gets leaders to have a calling to be sustainable? Because this calling is correlating to success through this virus era. And we found of those leaders that were really succeeding with sustainability, 45% were able to say, I was born with this. I can't explain why I've got this. I just seemed, since I was a child, it was important to do the right thing, not just the profitable thing. 43% admit to being convinced. They weren't thinking like this, but then they watched Al Gore documentary. They read statistics. They were shown data, and then they believed. And then we had 12% that we call the awoken. Something happened in their lives where they witnessed and saw the impact of sustainability for themselves, and they vowed to go on a path of leadership that was going to be to better that. So reflect for yourselves as you listen. If this is you, where has it come from, this source? Because if we can connect to why people choose this path, then we're more likely to be able to identify and promote and develop and get leaders in the CEO and chairman roles less accidentally thinking like this. So in the study, which looked and came about, what is it we saw where we found profound differences in those that were doing this well? We found that there were leaders with a sustainable mindset, and this looked like the leaders that were succeeding in the new era. First of all, they were good chess players, not literally, but metaphorically. Every decision they made, they thought about, what is my impact laterally and vertically? What is my impact over multiple levels of the market and internally in my business? I'm playing a game of chess. How many moves ahead can I see? Because as a consequence of the decision I'm making. And they took their time to do it, and they had the competence to do it. Much like a chess player making a move and being able to envisage hundreds of moves that might happen now because of that. So they had multi-level systems thinking. We can select that early. The second thing that differentiated them was, and this was very clear, they weren't just serving their stakeholders, appeasing them, or complying with them. They were involving them. How do we get our customers involved in our sustainability agenda? How do we get our shareholders involved? It was very active collaboration, creating a movement rather than creating compliance. And that was making a profound difference. But then we add it to a mindset of disruptive innovation. They weren't doing this for charity. They were doing this for commercial future voice. The sustainable leaders that were really succeeding, they didn't get that there was a continuum of, do you want me to be profitable or do you want me to be sustainable? Those that were struggling did. Those that were struggling told us, you can't have both. Do you want profits or sustainability? But the really elite didn't even see them on the same spectrum. In fact, they said, until we're sustainable, we will not protect our profits. So there's an attitude here in these leaders, which is upholding normal common sense. And then finally, they differentiated by, they weren't making sustainable decisions to get a result for the next year. It wasn't, let's switch off all the lights this year and haven't we done well? Their decisions were looking, I'm doing something that will last forever to be sustainable. Long-term activation, long-term deliberate planning. And these four things, when we saw them together, were common to the top 1% of leaders commercially succeeding and sustainably succeeding. And yes, these were the ones who are finding it easier to navigate their companies through this COVID era. So it really comes down to an attitude. And what we're seeing in our clients around the world, it is not about competence, whether they're succeeding or not. It's about, are they putting in place the conditions for their companies to succeed? It's quite a subordinate, servient mindset of leadership. And it's differentiated by, did they see this as a threat or did they see this as an opportunity, no matter how damaging it might be for their industry? It's an interesting analogy that children, their attitude to the dark, they're either frightened of the dark of what might be in it, or they're reassured by the dark because it hides and protects them. Same environment, different mindset. The leaders that are succeeding have a mindset of, this is our era. We will do better than the others, and we're going to work to solve problems faster, the real escape room specialists. Those that are struggling, their mindset is just to protect their organization. And what an honorable mindset that is. I, as a leader, am here to protect, but it isn't working. And it's those that say, this is our moment. We're going to project ourselves, not protect ourselves. So we're seeing there's attitude, we're seeing there's competence, but what it comes down to was, do people believe there's a choice? And really this is the message where we're seeing those leaders that will choose to succeed through this era. Their mindset is, I am consciously incompetent. What got me successful to this point, I'm going to assume won't keep me successful going forward. And I need to learn. And the people I'm going to learn from are coming to work with me every day. We're going to do this together. So what are those paths? What are the choices? And let's experiment and let's make mistakes. But to assume to batten down and hide while this goes over is causing companies to fail, indeed, to completely to demise. We are, and I invoke the voice of most of the clients I talk to, we are halfway through year one of the COVID era. We need to get used to this. And that's the only responsible mindset to have, because to presume it's going to be over soon is the only certainty that we're playing Russian roulette with our decision making. So I pause there and I'll wrap up here because I'm keen to have given some time for any questions and discussion on this. But the headings are thinking with the humility that says, I need to learn, I need to listen, I need to change my mindset on sustainability. I need to change the way we're connecting, the way we're thinking about time horizons, and finding that compass heading, which is, what is our purpose here? Because it's too much burden on a leader for everyone to follow them as the problem solver. And those leaders that are doing this, they're the ones whose share prices are going back up. Early days, small population, but the clues are giving us confidence. So a glimpse, and I hope that's been helpful or triggered some thoughts for conversation or questions going forward. I'll drop out of the screen share and look forward to questions that may come from this.
lot of food for thought there. You mention about shareholders now have to be patient, and this is not so natural for many shareholders, and that customers and employees come first. And you talked about renewing their vows. And in your experience, even with the evidence of COVID and how big a disruptor, are investors and shareholders being patient in general?
Well, I think what they want is clarity. This is this thing of they're not willing to follow a CEO out of faith. If the CEO says, hey, trust us, we're going to be back at double-digit growth again by next March, we know what we're doing, no one's trusting that. So I can't follow you out of faith. I need to follow you out of belief. I need you to show me you're working, to show me how you're thinking. And those CEOs that are doing that are getting a premium on their stock. Morningstar famously has been saying, we're putting a buy on this stock because of the way management's thinking about the situation. Wow, a premium on a competence. So they want clarity. They are going to be patient if they think that in an industry, we've chosen a stock to put in our portfolio. And we will stay patient to that stock if it's making sense of this situation clearly better than the competition. They don't want to be trading in and out. They want to be invested. So clarity is driving confidence, not faith. And we're finding those investors want to be patient, particularly the most powerful funds in the world, which are the pension funds, who are holding your money for 30 years and not wanting to day trade it like a casino. And so the patience is there. It's the communication that counts.
So obviously, I mean, time is needed to properly analyze how leaders have performed in this period. But let's say, anecdotally or from your observation, are most leaders rising to a challenge of this new, role that they have to play? Or is it 50-50, or are most simply not managing to cope? What's your impression?
What we have seen from our own client base, and that's mostly the voice we're hearing from boards, once this took hold on economies, we found CEOs went into two responses, almost a T-junction. There were those CEOs that went into what we call passive response, which is, I'm not making any decisions. Let's just let things settle down. Let's listen. And I don't want to ruin things by making a bad call. And they went missing, a passive response. Then we had leaders that went into an aggressive response, which was, it's not that I don't trust everybody, but I'm responsible here. I will make all the decisions. I will tell everyone what we're doing. You need to keep up and trust me. Well, both of those failed. Both of those caused trauma. And the leaders that have really succeeded, as I pointed out, said, stop. We know what we're doing. Our purpose gives us guidance. A great example of this, I've personally been working with a bank CEO who's been leading one of the world's biggest banks. He is about to announce the most boring strategy the world has ever heard for a bank. And he's going to say, here's what we're doing. We're understanding the needs of customers really carefully. And then we're going to develop and recruit and support our employees. And the strategy is, how do we connect employees to customers? That's it. End of strategy presentation. Any questions? Because our purpose is exactly that. And that's going to get a lot of followership. But it's been 30 or 40 years where complex sophistication has brought that confidence in the past. So the ones that are thriving are the ones that are just making it simple now, not the ones that are trying to make it about protection.
Okay, thank you. We pretty well run out of time, but just a very quick question from the audience. So a very quick answer, if we can have it. What do you think about Mitbestimmung? If you don't know what it is, it's a law in Germany which imposes inclusion of employees in supervisory board. Yeah, that's the question.
It is unique to Germany. And at what point is it inappropriate to say one of the stakeholders we're here for is the employees? Not only should there be employees on boards, but surely we're in an era where, why isn't there a customer on a board as well? Surely their voice is incredibly valuable for this era where the employee and the customer are now the primary stakeholder. So yeah, maybe its era has come at a much more global level now than a regional level.
That would be really interesting to have customers in the supervisory board. Wow.
True.
But things are changing fast. Stephen, thank you very much. And I just want to also add that Russell Reynolds Associates is the co-creator of this whole segment on improving the way the world is led. So it's very much your creation as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you to Agnieszka Snarska, who is a friend of us and is helping us with this module. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you so much.
It's an honor and a pleasure. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much.
All the best. Bye-bye.